Hello. The clay fountain projects are going great. We've got beautiful slab molded bowls, decorative rims. We're ready for part 2 of this project. But first, let's take a second and find some inspiration in the artwork of Klaus Weber. Klaus Weber is a German artist who has created some of the most mind-blowing and creative fountains of all time. In 2008, Klaus Weber made a fountain that doesn't use water at all. Instead, it uses sand and operates kind of like a never-ending hourglass. 6 years before that, in 2002, he took to the streets of Los Angeles, where he disguised a fountain as a car accident. This piece was created with a real car and a real fire hydrant. He got permission from the city of Los Angeles to do it. And this fountain definitely blurs the line between art and everyday life. But Klaus Weber's most notorious fountain is one that he built in London, titled The Big Giving. This fountain features figures trapped in stone, figures that spit, puke, drip water from their nose, pee. Yes, there's a surprising amount of peeing fountains around the world, and even sweat water from their armpits. To provide an explanation for this strange fountain, it's supposed to be a comment on how much wastewater humans create in a big city like London. With that inspiration in mind, let's resume our fountain. Where we left off last time, we had 3 bowls with spouts and rims. But sculpting the spouts onto these bowls was pretty tricky, so I wanted to take some time and give a few more tips for spouts before we move on. First tip, put a folded up piece of newspaper or paper towel down in the bottom of your bowl to soak up any water that may pool up down there while you sculpt your spouts. If your clay is soft, you can sculpt your spouts straight out of the walls of your bowl. Use a pinching, sliding, pushing motion to sculpt your spout, and then use the other hand to support and cradle the walls of your bowl. If you don't hold and support the walls of your bowls while you do this, your bowl will fall apart. After your first round of sculpting your spout, you'll probably end up with something that's kind of thin and sloppy looking. The best thing to do is to take that with some water and kind of smush it back in. This will compress the clay and make it so that it's flexible but also strong. And when you sculpt it back out next time, it should be a little bit neater. Repeat this process until you get a nice, neat spout. In most cases, you'll also need to add a little chunk of clay to that area to actually have enough clay there to sculpt out a spout. Scratch up the spot, add some water, and press that little piece of clay on. Then keep pushing the clay out, smushing it back in, sculpting it back out, smushing it back in, supporting the walls of your bowl, and soon you will end up with a nice, smooth, neat spout shape sticking out from your bowl. But this spout shape needs to angle down a bit more. So the very final step will be to fold that spout down so that it has a nice dripping kind of hook shape to the end of it. This will cause the water to fall straight down off of the spout. Beautiful. Then you can repeat those techniques for the other spouts in your bowl. If your bowl starts to get kind of weak and flat, support it by putting it inside of a smaller bowl so that it can keep its bowl shape. And soon your spouts will be done. Now, if the clay on your bowl was not soft and flexible, you should not try to sculpt spouts out of it because it will probably crack your bowl. What you need to do is roll out a coil and add a coil of fresh clay along the rim and use that fresh clay to sculpt your spouts with. And of course, always remember to scratch, dab with water, and press on. Now, the whole point of doing this is to add some fresh clay along the rim, so you could also do this using balls of clay. If you just put fresh balls of clay all along the rim, you could sculpt a spout out of those or sculpt it out of a coil. I'm using the same techniques, pinching that out, and it's going to look kind of thin and funky, but then I'm going to push it back in, smush it back in, and smooth it to compress the clay, holding the walls of my bowl as I do this, and just using my fingers to form that spout shape and then angling it down so the water drips nicely off of it. Using the same technique here, just with a ball of fresh clay on the rim, smushing it out, smushing it back in, holding the walls of the bowl until I get that shape I'm looking for. Another beautiful spout. And now that we have 3 bowls, we're ready for part 2, 3 stands. The stands will go in between the bowls and connect them. The first stand I'm going to make is the one that goes in between the big bowl and the medium bowl. And this stand is going to be made using another slab molded bowl that's going to be turned upside down. inside of the big bowl. So that means I'm going to roll out a pinky thick slab, spread out the newspaper, and spray down the mold. Now for this size bowl that I need, I'm going to actually do a drape mold where I drape the clay over the bottom of a bowl. These are a little bit trickier to cut out because I have to be precise so that I don't cut it out too close or too far away from the edge. You want it to stay a pinky's width along the rim. Beautiful. This is a nice size bowl that will fit right down in the middle. You want that slab molded bowl to be big enough to fit in the middle and rest on the flat part in the middle of the bowl. Once you have a pinky thick bowl that fits nicely upside down in your big bowl, then you're ready for the next part of your stand, which may be to go ahead and attach your medium bowl. But if you want a little more height, we could add some coils to it. So I'm going to roll out some coils. I'm going to attach them to the bottom of that upside down bowl. It's important that these coils be level and centered one to the top of that bowl. So I'm using another bowl to kind of make a little circular imprint right on top of that one right in the middle so that I have a little bit of some guidelines of where to scratch. So I know I'm putting them on in a nice, even, perfect circle. And then you always got to scratch it, dab it with water, and press on firmly. It's really important that this stand is strong. As I put on a few more coils, I'm going to be very thoughtful about the shape. I want this stand to go in a little bit and then back out. So to get that shape, I'm going to wrap the second coil a little bit tighter, a little bit shorter diameter, smaller diameter, going in, making a cone shape. As the circles get smaller, a single coil may overlap itself, but you still have to scratch and dab with water anywhere they overlap and connect. If there's cracks, you can stitch them and then smooth them out with the brush. Now the last coil I put on, I'm going to start to wrap it back out in wider circles so that it can support the medium bowl. It's important to trim this last coil at a spot that will make that top ring perfectly flat, so that the bowl that sits on top of it is also flat. But before we attach the bowl, we need to use a fettling knife to drill a hole down in the middle of this stand. Eventually, this hole will be what the tube sticks up to send water to the top of the fountain. Make sure that the hole is at least a finger thick, maybe even up to a thumb thick. Now we're ready to attach that medium bowl. So we're going to scratch up the top of the stand. We're going to scratch up the bottom of the bowl. The bottom of your bowl may be kind of dry, so you should scratch it, dab it with water, scratch it some more, really wake that clay up so that it's fresh and it can have a good bond with that stand. Before you press it down too hard, you want to make sure that it's centered and level. Get a look at it right down low at eye level and look at all sides. Once you're sure that you've got it in the right spot, then you can go ahead and press it down firmly and drill a hole in the middle of it, because the tube will continue up through this second tier of the fountain all the way up to the top tier. For the top part of the fountain, you will repeat the same steps, just using a smaller bowl mold and a smaller stand to hold up that top tier. So I'm going to roll out a slab, making sure it's pinky thick, and to make this one a little smaller, instead of draping it on the outside, I'm going to put it in the inside to make a smaller bowl. They should fit down inside that medium bowl of the fountain. Then I'm going to add a few coils around the top of it, making sure these coils are centered, well attached, and wrapping tighter as they go up into a bit of a cone shape. You probably don't need to add more than 2 or 3 layers of coils to each stand in your fountain, because if you add too many, it could be too tall and unstable, or the water could splash out of it. Poke through and twist the fettling knife to drill a hole in the stand. This stand will be attached both to the bottom of the medium bowl, with lots of scratching, dabbing water, and pressing on firmly, and it will also need to be attached to the bottom of the top tier. So we'll scratch it, dab with water, make sure that it's centered and level, press it on, and drill the final hole through the fountain. Now we can set these top 2 tiers inside the bottom big bowl of our fountain. They will never actually attach to that big bowl because we'll always need to be able to take them off to access the motor. But that looks really good. I could add a bottom stand, but after looking at it like this, I really don't think it needs it. If you decide that your fountain did need a stand for its bottom big bowl, you would make it using the same techniques that we did for the other two stands. Or in the case that you ran out of time or ran into some problems by making your fountain, you could have a fountain with just a big bowl and one tier, and it could simply just rest on an upside down bowl. A nice big bowl, a medium bowl with some nice spouts, that alone could create a really nice fountain. You would just need to scratch the top of that stand, the bottom of the bowl, dab with water, and then press them together firmly. Drill a hole between them for the tube so that you can have water come out the top into that bowl. And voila, you'd have a finished fountain. There are a lot of different ways you could end up with a successful fountain, but the most important things are to make sure that your spouts are well sculpted and that the connections between your bowls are strong. And with that said, let's get sculpting.